Hello everyone and welcome to the new video of Python tutorials for beginners series. In this video we will be taking a look at how to catch the errors in our program so that we can avoid our program from breaking. Also, we will be taking a look at how to handle these exceptions in a different way. Also, if you're interested in more Python content for beginners, you can check the link in the description to see the full Python for beginners series. Now let's see how we can catch our errors with try and except blocks in Python. So let's just assume we're taking an input from a user, and let's say this is a number. Now let's say num equals input, and for the prompt, let's say enter an integer. And with this integer, what we will do is we will get a result by dividing 100 by the number we just got from the user. And we called it num. And we actually want to print the result here. So now let's run the code. And if you're getting any issues while getting input from the user, you might just check our video on inputs and strings. We basically covered how to get inputs from the user in that video. And for the input we give 5. And here, as you can see, we get 5 and everything is working as normal because we're dividing 100 by the input, which is 5, and 20 is the expected result. But here things can get a little more interesting. Let's just say we entered 0 as an input. As you all know, a number cannot be divided by 0, and it's the same way in Python too, and in Python this is called zero division error. A value cannot be divided by 0, it would be undefined, and therefore an exception is raised in Python here. Just like you see in this case, we are expecting an input from the user. However, the value user inputs is breaking our program, and we actually don't want this to happen. We still want our program to be functional. And this is actually possible with the try and except blocks. So let's just copy this whole code block, and now we'll be using a keyword called try. Under this try keyword, we'll basically paste all the code we want to execute. And as you might notice, all this code will be indented, as you see here. After this code block is entered, there's still an error under the try block, as you can see. And it is basically saying it needs an except or finally keyword after it. So let's just, for our case, enter an except keyword, and after this except keyword we want to write which exception we want to handle. And as you might remember from the previous output, the exception we were getting is zero division error. And now we are accepting this error, which means we are catching this error, and now we will write some code which we want to execute when this error happens. So when the user enters 0, let's just say you can't enter 0. In this way, we are executing or trying to execute this code block, and when we actually face this zero division error here, we accept it and execute another code block which is written under this except keyword. And so now let's run this code. And when we enter 0 now, as you can see, we get you can't enter 0 instead of an error. But now what users can do is actually entering any string here. And as we're trying to convert it to an integer here, converting this to an integer won't be possible, right? So let's just assume you're a user and enter a string. And here, our program will break again with the value error. So now this is a different exception or an error than zero division error. And as we have only specified zero division error here, we might still get value error as well. So we need to, let's accept this error as well, called value error. And now when this error happens, we will print please enter a number. There you go. So now we've written different code blocks for both cases, and in case any of these errors happen, you will have a different situation or different code block running for that specific case. And so now let's enter a string again, and let's see if value error happens. And as we see here, we are getting please enter a number output. But of course, writing different exceptions or except statements for each error and every error can get pretty tedious, and there's a short way to doing that. And this way we'll actually accept all of the exceptions which can happen during the execution of this code block. And we do this by just writing except here. So this basically accepts any exception or any error, and now we will just print error happened, let's say, because we don't know the error, but an error happened, and we will print that. Let's say when we enter 0, we are getting we're seeing an error happened, or when we're entering a string, we're seeing an error happened. And there is also a way to detect the errors happening in this code block, and this is by accepting an exception as a value, and this value could be E, this value could be exception again, and you could basically enter any name, just like we were choosing our variable name, and for now let's just say E, just because it's short, and this E is basically the name of the exception that happened here. So let's just print this error happened, and then print E. So now we don't need this. So when we run this code, we see that when we enter 0, we will see division by 0 has happened, or when we enter a string, email literal for int with base 10 has happened now, which is basically entering a string and not being able to convert it to an integer. Okay, great. Now we are able to detect some errors happening in our program, and we are able to run some different code when these kind of errors are happening. But now let's say we want to execute some different code when an error doesn't happen. And how we will do that is by an else statement. Now you might be familiar with an else statement from the if-else or conditional statements, but else statement is actually used for try and except blocks as well. So this else statement will basically execute when an error doesn't happen or this exception block doesn't run here. So let's just assume this code block ran perfectly and no error happened, then the code under the else block will execute. Let's just say no error happened here. And actually we could even take this print result under the else block here, because we only want to really print the result when an error doesn't happen. If an error happens, we won't be able to print anyways, so we can just print this under the else block. And let's now try to basically enter 0 again, and let's see what happens. Okay, now we're getting division by 0 and nothing is happening. But now let's try to be kind towards the program, and let's enter a reasonable value, and let's enter 10. And here we're getting no error happened, as we see under the else statement, and we're getting the result as we see under the else statement again, which is 10. So in addition to an else statement, there is also another statement we are using while using try and except block, which is called finally. And as its name suggests, this will happen when the process is finished, and the code block under this finally block will execute regardless of an error happening or not. So let's assume an error happened, this finally block will still execute, and let's say process finished here. And so even if we actually enter like a 0 or enter a string, we still see the process is finished because of this finally block here. And this is because there might just be some code blocks you might want to run in both cases of an error happening or not. So this finally block is basically providing you that feature. Now let me just show you the finally block executes also when we enter a reasonable number. And again, we are seeing this else statement as well as the finally block when we enter an errorless input. So basically, try and except blocks is a structure of trying some code and having the code that might possibly cause you errors or exceptions in Python as they are called. And then the except block usually comes, almost always actually. And this except block basically tells you what to do when you face an exception. We could also specify a specific exception here, or we could just accept any exception or any errors in general, like we did here. Then we have this else statement, but this else statement isn't actually necessary. It basically executes when you don't get an error, and then the finally statement executes in both cases of an error or not error. And I actually wanted to show you the structure as a pseudocode as well, so just let me paste it here. And this is the pseudocode of basically a try and accept block, and I will probably leave this in the description as well, just because I think it can get pretty useful while writing all these try and accept blocks. Also, I want to show you one more thing, which is this else and finally blocks are actually not necessary here. So you could just have a try and except block, which just tries some code and does execute some other code when it encounters an exception. But here, just these else and finally statements actually can provide more value into your code as well. Also, we could not need this even exception, so we could just remove it as well, and we would just basically try some code, and if we encountered an exception, nothing would happen. Basically, this finally block would execute, just like it says in this structure. So thank you for watching until the end of the video, and please leave a like and share this video with your friends, and I hope to see you in the next video.